Parshas Bo on page 340. V'yomer Hashem Moshe Bo el Paro. Hashem tells the Moshe, come to Paro. Because I have hardened his heart. So the first thing I think we have to discuss is this question of what is this idea of God hardening the heart of Pharaoh? I mean, here, what's going on? Pharaoh has the Jewish people, or the Hebrews at this point, as slaves. God tells Moshe, I want you to be my messenger to go and take the Jews out of Egypt. And if he doesn't listen to you, I'm going to force him to listen to you by putting these plagues. So he sends the plagues. Pharaoh says, okay, enough already, stop it, I'll let him go. So God comes and hardens his heart and makes it so he says no. So he's doing the opposite of what he said. He says, I want you to get the Jews out of there. And then every time the Jews are about to get out, God makes it that Pharaoh changes his mind on purpose. So it's like, it's like, what do they call him? He's like a counter spy, like he's spying for the wrong side. Because God says let him out, and then as soon as they're ready to let him out, God makes Pharaoh say no. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Why that would be. So from this we understand a very important concept here, which is, why is all of this happening? Why is God doing all this? It is true. He wants that the Jews had to go down to Egypt. Slavery was a part of really creating within the Jewish people a spiritual DNA, spiritual genetics within us that would cause us to be able to live through all of the difficulties of history. Right, at this point, we're just beginning. So God sent the Jewish people in to be slaves. If they could get through this, they're going to be tough. And then, right, from then on, you'll see that they refer to us as being stiff-necked, right, being strong, because you tried to break, Pharaoh tried to break the Jews, he couldn't do it. Throughout history, they tried to break the Jews, they couldn't do it. The more they pushed, the harder we got. So this is where we get this in this story. So it was necessary that the Jews go down to Egypt in the first place to become slaves in order for us to get the character trait that God knew we needed to get through history. But then it's over, all right? We accomplished the goal. He did it. Now it's time for us to come out. So now God has another goal. And that other goal, which we made reference to last week, but this is where we see it, is that God wants that the whole world should know that He's God. Right? Right? Like, sometimes I'll have a conversation with someone and they'll say, all right, all of this logic is very good, but if you want me to believe in God, I want God to take that box of Kleenex over there and lift it up 6 inches just for 5 seconds right now. So I'll tell you now, God is not going to do it. He will never do that. He could, but He won't. And the reason He won't is because He already did it. And this is where He did it. Where God takes the water of the Nile and turns it to blood, where God makes frogs go all over the place, where He brings in, like lice, and brings in all kinds of pestilence and wild animals that come out of Africa into Egypt, right? All of these crazy things go on, right? They're all going on because you want me to prove I'm God? Okay, I'm going to prove to the entire world one time I'm God. And that's it. Now, from now on, I've done that. Now it's up to you to believe me. I think I gave the example of this with a guy who goes to the Louvre in Paris, and he goes to see the Mona Lisa, right? Which I went to see. Like, you have this big giant room, little tiny picture, right? So and all these people are crowding around all the time. So you go up there to look at it, right? So you imagine you're going up to look at it, and you've got a curator there. So I go in and I go, nothing special. Oh, it's okay. And he goes, sir, what do you think about the pictures? It's nothing special. He says, no, that's not what I mean. He says, it's already been decided that this is one of the best pieces of art in history. That's been decided. I'm not asking you if it's good or not. That's decided. The question is, are you sophisticated enough to realize it? Can you tell that it's good? But we already know it's good. So that's the real question. And that's the idea here. God has already proven that He is God. That's who He is. That's what He's doing here. Right? That's why He has all these plagues. That's why He keeps hardening Pharaoh's heart. Because He's using this as an opportunity to tell the world from now forever, if you ever want to know that there's a God, look here. I turned the water to blood. I brought in the frogs. I killed the firstborn. I did all of this. And so the whole world will know it. So now then you'll ask me, of course, if God did this for an ulterior purpose, which was that the whole world from now on should know that He's God, which is a good purpose. So, but why is He taking it out on the Egyptians? Right? Those poor people, like, what did they do? It's not just that God should say, I'm going to punish them over and over and over again, just so the whole world should know that I exist. Right? Well, it's a good purpose that He did it, but why them? So the answer is that God has to be just. God's not going to do something like that and be unjust about it. And the fact is that the Egyptians deserved it. Because while it was true that the Jews had to go to Egypt to become slaves, that was a necessity in order for us to become the people we are, the commentaries tell us that the Egyptians and Pharaoh went way beyond what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to make us into slaves. They weren't supposed to try to destroy us. And that's what they tried to do. They went way beyond what their job was. And because of that, they're held accountable. There are ramifications for their actions. They weren't just people who had slaves. They beat us, and they killed us, and they took away our dignity and our humanity, and they tried to destroy us. And because of that, they're punished. And therefore, it is just that they're punished for this, and that's why these plagues happened. But we see that God has multiple reasons for things, and therefore when we talk about how God tells Pharaoh to Moshe here, go back to see Pharaoh because I hardened his heart, right? We would think that that's counterproductive, but the fact is it's not. God hardened his heart because Pharaoh was ready to give in, but God wanted that the world should know that I exist and who I am, and that's what goes on here and went on last week as well. He says, and it says it very clearly. He says, Ki ani higbariti es libo, I hardened his heart, v'eslev avadav, and the heart of all of his servants. Why? Leman shisi ososai elebikirbo, so that I should be able to make my signs among them. In other words, so I should be able to do these miracles right among them all. That was the idea behind it. Is why he does this. And then we go on, right? So Moshe and Aaron come to Pharaoh and they say, so says Hashem, God of the Hebrews, until when you will refuse to be humbled before me, send out my people that they may serve me. Now this is a famous line, right? Send out my people. Right? And we hear it all the time. It's shalach imi, right? Let my people go. But we always forget the next word. And that's important. When Moshe tells Pharaoh, let my people go, it says why. It tells you why. Let my people go so they can serve me. So that they can be a part of Judaism. They can follow the purpose of the world, of following the Torah, following what God wants. Right? God didn't say just free my people. There was a purpose for it. We have the same thing also later on. We have in our writings, it says, right, to make us into a unified people. Right, so everybody says, we have to have unity. We all have to get along, and that's very important. But it also says why, in order to serve me, a unified people to serve God. In other words, there's a purpose for the Jewish people. There is the best ways of doing it, and the best way of doing it is unified. Right? If we're fighting with each other, we can't do anything. So we should be unified. Here he tells him, right, the whole reason for all of these things happening is so that the world should know that I exist. I'm going to do my signs among you. Then he then tells them about the locusts and what's going to happen with the locusts. And interestingly enough, right, it says that the locusts will come, they'll fill your houses, and they're going to be all over your servants. They're going to destroy all of your vegetation. So you imagine all these farmers in Egypt, all of their crops are going to be eaten. They're going to be destroyed. The economy of Egypt is going to be destroyed with this. That's what's going to happen by the locusts, right? But it says that that Moshe doesn't wait for him to answer. He says, let my people go, or I'm going to send in locusts. They're going to destroy your entire economy. And Moshe leaves. He doesn't wait for him to say, okay, all right, I'll let him go. He doesn't wait. If you look, it says, they'll fill your houses, the house of all your servants, and all the houses of all Egypt, such as your fathers and grandfathers have not seen, from the day they came unto the earth till this day. And he turned and he left Pharaoh's presence, right, period. Right, so he left before he could answer him. He asked him a question. Let the Jewish people go, or we're going to send in these bugs. They're going to destroy all your crops. Which do you want? And he leaves. Doesn't wait for him to answer. And then what happens? Pharaoh's servants say to Pharaoh, how long will this be a snare for us? Send out the men that they may serve Hashem, their God. Do not yet know that Egypt is lost. You realize, Pharaoh? The economy has been destroyed. There is no. We are the. Imagine, Egypt is the most powerful nation in the world. It's like going into the United States and telling the President of the United States, "We are going to destroy your economy if you don't do what we say." Right? So like, what is he going to do? It's not like, we don't like you and we're going to put a bomb in New York City. We're going to destroy your entire economy. It's going to be no more economy. All of your food will be eaten by bugs. There'll be nothing left for you. What are you going to do? Right? So that's what's happening here. And so the Egyptian advisors to Pharaoh tell Pharaoh, wait, do you realize they're destroying our country? Let them go already. Why are you keeping them? You're being counterproductive. You're going to have no country left. Right? So then, after that, then it says, so Moshe and Aaron will return to Pharaoh. Then they came back. They wanted to give the opportunity for Pharaoh to have a discussion with their advisors. Pharaoh should have a discussion with his advisors so that he should hear from them what they have to say. But if Moshe and Aaron would stay there, right, they wouldn't be able to speak openly among themselves. Then you have another problem here, is that Moshe and Aaron come back, and Pharaoh, and he says to them, go and serve Hashem, your God. Who's going? And he goes through this negotiation as to who he lets go. But the fact is, no matter what Pharaoh says, Moshe already knows the locusts are going to come and eat all the food. We know there's going to be 10 plagues. We know already that no matter what Pharaoh does, there's going to be 10 plagues. So then, right, so he leaves because he doesn't need the answer. He wants him to talk. They should discuss with each other openly. And that way the advisors can advise Pharaoh, you better listen. But then Moshe comes back and he knows that he won't listen, and he knows that he's going to destroy it anyways. So why does he come back? So the point is that Moshe understands two things about human beings, how the psyche of human beings, and they're important for us to know. One is giving the opportunity to Pharaoh and his advisors to talk in private is extremely important. That you have the ability to do this. We say that this is one of the reasons we say that human beings have partners. We have spouses, because it says that when you're in a difficult situation, you need to get advice from someone who you can trust 100%. So who do you trust better than yourself? You trust yourself. So you say, well, how can I get advice from myself? If I got advice from myself, I already know the answer. So that's no good. So you find somebody who's you, but who's not you. That's your spouse. Your spouse is you, but not you, right? You have total dedication to each other. You're like one person, but you're two separate people. So you have an opportunity to go and speak to your spouse, to consult with each other, to advise each other, to warn each other, to help each other in order to come up with a response. So Moshe understood that the only way that would happen first is if he leaves. Because if he stands there, they won't have that discussion, because they have to have a certain facade in front of Moshe. They have to be tough in front of Moshe, right? So he leaves. So he wants him to have that. Secondly is, even though Moshe knows that the locusts are going to come and the Pharaoh is going to say no, he still gives them the opportunity to talk, which means that the idea of talking, of discussing between people, in and of itself is positive. The ability to sit and talk, right, between people who trust each other, is in and of itself gives you ideas, gives you thoughts, gives you the ability to do things that otherwise you could not normally do. That the talking is extremely important. I see, for instance, when I do counseling, right, and I do quite a bit of counseling, and I have for most of my career. Sometimes I did counseling as the main part of my career. And what I find in counseling is that there are very often, there's nothing I can do for the person. They're in debt up to their eyeballs, and they've lost their job, and now they're going to lose their house. I can't give them money. I don't have that kind of money. I can't fix it. They're having problems with their spouse, right? And they're going through a divorce. It's already been decided. What am I going to do? Talk them out of it? It's already been done, right? They want to have children. They can't have children. I can't make them have children. So what do? The fact is that I sit and talk to the people, and I have a conversation, and I show them that I care, makes them feel better. Just that alone, just being able to have an open conversation where you know that whatever you say in my office or in any person's office like this will not leave the office. Like I tell people all the time, you come see me in my office, My wife doesn't know who I see. Nobody knows who I see. Nobody knows what I talk about. It's just between us. In fact, sometimes I get in trouble. People will come to see me and they'll tell me something, like they'll come in to talk private about something, but then, while they're there, they'll say, oh, by the way, my son got engaged. Well, that's great, right? And then they'll get upset because my wife doesn't say Mazel Tov. It's because I didn't tell her. Because I don't tell anybody anything that goes out of my office. Unless you specifically tell me, I'd like you to tell them. Then I would. But they didn't do that, so I don't tell them. Right? So certainly the things that are private I don't tell, but even other things I don't. You never know what people are sensitive about. So in any case, the idea that I talk to someone, and it's not me, anyone who does this, who talks to another person, it helps that other person. They feel that you're sharing in their pain. It lessens their pain. You give them the opportunity to express themselves. It gives them answers to their own questions. Just recently, I was meeting with someone, and they had a problem. And I said, I've known you a long time, and you're a smart person. If I would come to you with this problem, you would know what to tell me. With the same problem, you would tell me exactly what to do. So why are you coming to me with the problem when you know the answer already? And that is because we get emotional, right? We get confused. We're having money problems, or we're having problems with our spouse, and at the same time we're having problems at work, and we're having a little bit of issue with the paper boy is not bringing the paper on time. Little things, big things, all mixed up. And what happens is it all gets confused in our head, and we can't deal with it. So what I have to do is to help people separate each problem, and then they can deal with it because they're intelligent, right? That's really, and how do you do it? That's talking. You talk to someone. Moshe and Aaron understood that simply the talking of Pharaoh and his advisors was therapeutic, would help Pharaoh come up with a way to deal with this problem, that everything would work out for them. It didn't happen that way, but even though Moshe knew that Pharaoh would not end up letting the Jews go, nevertheless Moshe understood the importance of the message being sent to us. Let people talk. Talking is good, though it's therapeutic, it's helpful, and that's what we see from that. And then of course we have this plague of the locusts. Then Pharaoh then says, okay, go. Right, and on 342 and 343, he asks Moshe, okay, you want to go? Who are you taking with you? Well, Moshe didn't ask to take someone with him. He's taking everybody, right? So Pharaoh's starting to negotiate, right? That's what he's doing. Oh, you want to go? All right, don't send those locusts. They'll destroy our economy. So who do you want to take with you? I'm going to start negotiating with you now. I'm not giving you all the people, but maybe if I negotiate with you, you won't send the locusts, and I'll be able to keep some. So Moses says, we're going to take our youngsters and our elders, with our sons and our daughters, our flocks and our cattle. Right? We're taking everybody, and we're taking everything with us. So he says to them, so be Hashem with you, as I will send you forth with your children. Okay, go. You can go with the children. Look, the evil intent is opposite your faces. Not so. Let my men go now. Serve Hashem, for that is what you seek. And he drove them out. So he tells them, all right, I'll let you go, but only with certain people. You can't go with just anyone. Right? So why is it so important to Moshe? So Moshe understood that the future of the Jewish people are the children. They're the next generation, and that he has to have them. You can't leave them behind. So that's why he negotiates that way. Hashem says to Moshe, stretch out your hand, and the locusts will come, and they come, and it goes on, and finally Pharaoh comes and tells them, stop it already. And Moshe goes and he sends them away after they've destroyed all of the crops. And then we have darkness. The next plague that comes is the plague of darkness. So we have to understand what this is. That it's not much of a plague that it's dark. I mean, right now this time of year it's dark 18 hours a day. Right? It makes you depressed maybe, and it's not very nice. Like your plants don't grow very well. But it's not a plague. It's not like locusts are everywhere, frogs are in your bed, right? Your water turned to blood. What's the big deal? So the fact is that the Medrash explains to us that this was darkness of the sort that we never experienced before. This was a darkness that had substance to it. In other words, what is our darkness? Basically, we see our darkness as the lack of light. There's no light, so it's dark. Right? And we probably haven't even really experienced darkness. There's always some light somewhere. But here, they're talking about a darkness that had weight. Like when it was so dark, it said the Egyptians couldn't move. They couldn't get out of it. They were sitting down, they couldn't stand up. They were standing up, they couldn't sit down. The darkness was so strong that it was not only dark, but it had substance. They couldn't move in the darkness. They couldn't go to the washroom. They couldn't eat. They couldn't do anything. Right? At the same time, the Jews had light in the same place. Right? It shows you, because every one of the miracles only happened to the Egyptians, not the Jews. The water turned to blood, but the Jews had water. Right? So here also, they had darkness, the Jews didn't. And it says, in fact, later on, we see that God tells the Jews, you're leaving Egypt. When you leave Egypt, you're going to be very wealthy. And it says that, and how they became wealthy is that we'll shortly see that God tells them, go to your friends, right, the Egyptians, and ask them to give you things. And at this point, the Egyptians will give them anything to get rid of them. So they said, but how did they know what to ask for? Like, if I go to my next door neighbor and I say, all right, I'd like $10,000 in Krugerrands. How's that, Krugerrands? Right? Probably only two. But give me the gold ones, right? $10,000 in the gold Krugerrands. Well, that's very nice. My next door neighbor doesn't have any coins. Like, how's he going to give them to me? So it says that during this plague, when the Egyptians were totally dark and they couldn't move, it said the Jews could. So they looked around. They saw what all the Egyptians had. And later, when God told them, go and ask them to give you things, they knew what to ask for. Now, but it says there, and it's in this PARSHA, it says, go to your friends and ask them. Do you think the Egyptians are their friends? The Egyptians were their slave masters. The Egyptians are being persecuted by the Jews now. They have darkness, they have plagues, they had frogs. Right? I would guess that the Egyptians probably don't love the Jews. So, but the fact is during this plague of darkness, as I told you, it was so dark and so heavy that they couldn't move, which means they couldn't eat. They couldn't eat for 3 days. Well, that's pretty much impossible, right? I mean, they're going to die. You couldn't go longer than 3 days, but how did they do it? So the Midrash says that the Jews who didn't have this plague would feed them. They went to their Egyptian neighbors and they fed them, and they took care of them, because they saw that they couldn't do anything. The Egyptians responded to that, right? So that afterwards they considered that these Jews were their friends. They treated them differently because they saw that even though we persecuted them, they still treated us with this dignity. So they realized that they were dealing with good people. So they saw the Jews differently. So at the bottom of this page on 344 and 345, you see Pharaoh says, get out of here already. And I don't want to see you anymore. So Moshe tells him, okay, I shall never see your face again, he tells him. But there's going to be one more plague. And this is, of course, the plague of the killing of the firstborn, which in and of itself is an extraordinary plague, because what it did was it was the firstborn, right? So you'd have, like, for instance, a family, and they could have 2 kids, and 2 would die. So how would that be? So it was the firstborn of the husband and the firstborn of the wife. So if you had the husband and wife together and they had 3 kids, so the firstborn son would die if they had a firstborn son. If they had more than one, it was a way of saying the woman was an adulteress and she had a relationship with another man and had another child. So the husband never knew. She thought it was his son, but it wasn't. It was a firstborn from another guy, so he also dies. Then also you had Pharaoh's own son was firstborn, and he dies. You have this. So it's a very odd thing, because if you read it, there's a number of problems here on this page. We start with verse 4. Right? It says, Moses says, so says Hashem, at about midnight I shall go out in the midst of Egypt. Every firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. So if we read earlier, when God tells Moshe what's going to happen about killing the firstborn, he tells Moshe, at midnight, I'm going to kill the firstborn. So tell Pharaoh, at midnight I'm going to kill the firstborn, but he doesn't do that. And even in the English, you see, he says, at about midnight. So you say, why does Moshe change the word of God? God says midnight, right? So there's a number of answers for this. The most common one is what Rashi says, which is that Moshe realized that the scientists of Egypt and the magicians of Egypt would know what time it is, but they could be off. And he says that here you would have a plague. You've had 9 plagues. They've all happened, like they say. The 10th plague comes and kills the firstborn. So you've got thousands upon thousands of dead Egyptians who just died. They were alive, and then they were dead, right? And they're going to say, that's no big plague. You know why it's not a big plague? Because you didn't kill him at midnight. You said at midnight. It was 3 seconds after midnight. You see, you're wrong. It wasn't that. It was just coincidence. Right? So Moshe said, I'm not going to let them do that because maybe their clocks are off. So I'm going to say at about midnight. Right? And therefore, if they die a few seconds before, a few seconds after, right? But the fact is they did die at midnight. It's just the Egyptians' clocks could be off, and he didn't want them saying it. But like, isn't that a silly thing to say? Here they go and they kill. You have a plague. Thousands of people are killed, right? Totally unexplained. They have the doors of your house. They're all locked, and somehow the kid dies. It's every single house they died. How and you don't think that they would say, oh, it's no big deal. You were off. It wasn't. They didn't die at midnight. They died at midnight and 3 seconds. So you see, it's not true. What are you talking about? Thousands of people are dead. Don't you care? Well, that's how people are. People who want to believe something will believe it. And if they don't want to believe something, they won't believe it. That's why when I have people who want to challenge me sometimes say, oh, I don't believe in God. Right? The fact is that most people don't believe in God and don't believe in Torah, and they have no idea what it is. They don't know what it is that they're rejecting. They don't know what they're reforming or they're rejecting or they're giving up. They have no idea. They've never read it. So how are you supposed to know that that people say to me, well, you know what, I'm an agnostic, or I just don't believe. The fact is, you can't just say I'm agnostic. You have to study. You have to say I reject God, or it's not important to me. You can't just say, I'd rather not keep Shabbos and keep kosher, so I'm agnostic. Right? I'm atheist. Well, that's very nice, but if you don't know what a theist is, then how can you be atheist, right? If you don't know what God is, how do you know you reject God? If you've never studied the Torah, how do you know that it's wrong? Right? That's a problem, right? Because people will believe whatever they want. Now, the fact is, let's say, it's a famous logical progression here. Let's say that Judaism is really true, right? And if you keep Shabbos, you'll get in the world to come, like after we die, you'll have an amazing experience because you did what you're supposed to do. And if you don't do what you're supposed to do, it's going to be very painful, right? So let's say that's true, right? So you are taking your entire life and you're banking on the fact that it's false because he was off by a minute, even though everybody died. That's a big price to pay. It's like if I come to you and I say, I have a lottery, and the lottery is you can win $100 million, and I'm only selling 10 tickets. Each ticket is $1 million. Would you buy a ticket? Yeah, maybe. You have to have $1 million, but if you can win $100 million, you put up $1 million, and there's only 10 tickets. You have a 10% chance to win, right? All of that money. So you think about it. Right? If I say to you it's $1 million, but there's 1 million tickets, right? So you're not going to do it. Right? Who's going to put up that kind of money is 1 million people, right? You're not going to win, so you're not going to do it. Right? If I tell you it's $100 million, tickets are $1, that you do. Because, all right, so if I lose $1, I lose $1. Maybe I won 100 million, right? Even though it's 100 million people buy the tickets. Doesn't matter. $1 I'll spend. Why? The idea is I have no problem giving up a little bit in order to win a lot, even though it's a small chance. I'm not going to give up a lot to win a lot, right? Because it's still a small chance. If it's a big chance that I'll win, then it's worth it. But a small chance, I won't. But yet people live their lives this way. People will say, I don't believe in God, and therefore they do whatever they want to do their whole life. And then in the end, they find out that there is a God, and they were wrong. Now, the problem with it is that they never took the time to study. They never took the time to read the book, or to question, or to argue, or to be critical. They never did. So then how do they know what they're doing? It's like, I don't believe in voting. I don't believe that you should vote for in any of the elections. Why? Because I just don't believe in it. But do you think there's something wrong with the democratic process? I don't know. I don't know anything about it. I just don't believe in it. Right? That makes no sense. Well, this idea makes no sense. And here, Moshe would say, these Egyptians make no sense. They're going to say that God didn't do it. I was wrong. I didn't do the 10th plague was wrong. You see, it's all false because their children all died, but a second later. So he says about midnight. That's one reason. Another reason is because to God, there's a midnight. Like God can tell you when midnight is, but you can't tell me when midnight is. It's not possible. There's no such time as midnight. In the real world, there is no such thing. Because as soon as you're at midnight, you're after midnight. Right? So we have this here with davening. It's a joke in our shul. That mincha right now is 5 minutes before 5. Right? So 4:55 is mincha. So the guy gets ready. He stands at the thing, and it's like 4:54, and he's waiting for the clock to change. And he'll start, because people come last second. If you start a minute early, people get upset because they missed it, right? Because everybody is unbelievable. You have nobody here, and like 10 seconds before it's time to start, the room fills up. I don't know how they can get in the parking lot like that, but they do. So the guy's counting. As soon as it's 4:55, he's late. He's late already, because he's supposed to start at 4:55. But if he started a second earlier, he's too early. Because there's no such time as 4:55. It doesn't exist. Time doesn't work that way. You can't tell me that God is going to kill the firstborn sons in the middle of the night. When is the middle of the night? So you just figure out the night is 12 hours long, right? So 6 hours the first half, 6 hours the second half. So right at 6 hours, it's middle of the night. I said, no, it's not. You're giving me a minute? In that minute? No. You've got to tell me by the second, by the millisecond. Right? Because every time that you get to a certain time, you can always split that time. You can't give me an exact point. So the only way we knew that these people died exactly in the middle of the night is because at a fraction of a second before the middle of the night they were alive, and a fraction of a second after the middle of the night they were dead. But we don't know when the middle of the night is, because you can never really say to the exact point. So Moshe said, it's fine for God to say the middle of the night, because God knows when it is. But human beings don't. If I say that to the Egyptians, no matter what I say, they're going to say I'm wrong. It didn't happen that way, because they can't judge that. So therefore, do you think you really should care that they're going to not believe it? So this is also important, right? Like, why should we really care that they're going to scoff at them? They're going to say, they died a second late. Why should we care? They died anyways, right? You want to tell us that it doesn't matter? It matters, right? Let's be serious. It matters. And the fact is that we do that because the people who are scoffers, right? The people who, no matter what you say, they're against it. We take them into account because we want to show that this is unequivocally true. What happens in the Torah is without question true. So if you can't see that exactly when midnight is, so Moshe will change the words, and he'll say about midnight. So that you can do. So that's why he does that. All right, so that's the first thing that comes on. And then, right, it says that all of these different people will die. So you have this whole thing where he says they're going to die, right? And Moshe leaves, right? And then we begin the next part. When we get a little further on, I'm going to have to skip a piece, but I want to show you something about it. That it says that, right, we have this whole thing about the Passover offering, and he puts the blood on the door so that you know that it's a Jewish home, and there won't be a firstborn won't be killed there. But when we skip ahead onto 357 and 356, beginning with verse 29, it says, it was at midnight that Hashem smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on the throne to the firstborn of the captive who was in the dungeon, and every firstborn animal. Pharaoh rose up at midnight, he and all of his servants, and all of Egypt, and there was a great outcry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was no corpse. Okay, now, let's look at this scene and tell me if it seems logical. Moshe comes to Pharaoh. 9 times he says, then this is going to happen, right, and it's going to devastate you. He's destroyed all of these things. Then he destroys the economy. Then he says to him, all right, this is your last chance. I'm going to kill the firstborn sons. Right? Pharaoh was a firstborn son. Pharaoh had a firstborn son. Pharaoh knew firstborn sons. Right? He's batting 1,000. Every time Moshe says something, it happens. Right? So if you're Pharaoh, okay, you want to fight him. So you're going to stand to be a tough guy, right? But on the night when it's supposed to happen, right, it's midnight. So what are you doing at 11 o'clock? Are you going to go to sleep? You can put on your pajamas and go to sleep? Because in an hour, everyone could die. Chances are they will, right? So you're not going to, so of course not. You're going to say it won't happen, and you'll tell everyone it's not going to happen. And you're going to tell everyone, we don't care what this God says. We're stronger than that God. The fact remains is, you're going to be worried that you're going to die, because you're a firstborn, and that your son's going to die. You're going to be worried about that. And then all of Egypt, they're going to rebel against you. You're worried, so you're not going to sleep. But it says here, and Pharaoh rose up in the middle of the night. Pharaoh went to sleep. There used to be a famous children's song that Pharaoh got up in his pajamas in the middle of the night and everybody was dead. So you have to ask, what's he doing going to sleep? Right? And the answer is that Pharaoh was a true believer. Pharaoh believed in what he was doing. He believed that God was not God. He believed that Moshe was a fake. He believed that they were wrong. And no matter how many times you proved to him that we're going to do what we say, he could always explain it away. And therefore, Pharaoh could have simply told his guys to go kill Moshe and end it already. Just kill him. Get rid of him. But why doesn't he do that? Or say, every time you come into my castle, I have a palace. You come into my palace, you make trouble for me. Every time. One time you come in, you turn the Nile into blood. One time there's frogs. One time there's darkness. Right? I'm just not going to let you come anymore. So he'll put a guard at the door and say, Moshe wants to see Pharaoh? Forget it. He's out of town. He's not going to see you. You're finished. Right? It'll be over. But he doesn't do it. He sees him every time he wants to come. He doesn't kill him when he could kill him. And then he goes to sleep. The answer is Pharaoh really, really, really believed that that he was God and this wasn't going to happen. That's what he believed. He wasn't pretending. And therefore it's perfectly logical that Pharaoh should go to sleep because he knows that the next morning he's going to wake up and no one's dead. So when they woke him up in the night and said people was dead, he was surprised because he really, really believed in what he was doing. It shows you how a person can trick themselves, really fool themselves, right? That he is God. He himself thinks that he's a God and that he's more powerful than God, and that it's not going to happen. Even though it keeps happening, it's not going to happen. And I'm going to show you. I'm going to sleep. I mean, that kind of person is very rare, right? To have a person who's so committed like that. Right, at such a point. But that's who he was, and people can be like that. He does it. Now let's go back because I skipped over an important part, which was the part that has to do where Moshe leaves after he tells Pharaoh what's going to happen, and now God comes to the Jewish people and he gives us our first commandment as a Jewish nation. Right, up until now, anytime that there's a commandment that's given to the Jewish people, it was given to people. Given to Abraham, circumcise yourself and all of your children after you, right? At the days of Jacob, it said, from now on, you can't eat the part of an animal. But you didn't have a Jewish nation. It didn't exist. Now they exist. And therefore, God gives them a first mitzvah. And you got to be a good one, right? An important one. This is the first one. God created the Jewish people. He's taking them out of Egypt. And they're within a day of leaving Egypt, the Jewish nation, and God gets them together and he says, I've got to tell you, this is the first commandment that I'm going to give you. Right? So you say, this is going to be a very important spiritual commandment. And here it's on 348, 349. Right? Hashem says to Moshe and Aaron, here's the commandment. This month shall be for you the beginning of the months. It shall be you the first of the months of the year. Speak to, right? That's the first mitzvah right there. The second mitzvah comes right after that. You know what it is? There's a mitzvah that we have a lunar calendar. Jews have a lunar calendar, right? We have the first day of the month is the first day when the moon reappears every month. That's our calendar. That's it. You say, thank you very much. You took me to Egypt for hundreds of years. I'm in Egypt. We're slaves. You do all these miracles. You bring us together as the Jewish people, right? You're building it like this. You would not win an Academy Award for this, right? You're building it up and building it up, and you can hear all the music starting to get loud in the background. And what happens? You should have a calendar, and your calendar should be by the moon. What is this guy, an accountant? What happened to all the emotion, the feeling, the important mitzvah? So the fact is that we have to now reevaluate. It is a very important mitzvah. It just doesn't sound like it. And the whole basis of the Jewish people is founded on this mitzvah. The fact that we're supposed to have a lunar calendar, well, what is it between a lunar calendar and a solar calendar? In general, the difference is the sun's the same every day. The moon isn't. As far as we see, not really, but in how we see it, one day there's no moon, next there's a little bit of a moon, then there's a full moon, then it starts getting smaller again, then it disappears again, and it keeps coming and going and getting bigger and smaller. Right? The sun is pretty much the sun. So when you use a lunar calendar, right, the Hebrew word for the month is Chodesh. Chodesh has a root word, like all Hebrew words, which is Chadash. Chadash means new, right? It means to renew. And that's what happens every month. The moon renews. It disappears, it comes back, right? It appears to. Right? The idea being is that God is talking to a bunch of slaves. Not only are they slaves, but their parents were slaves. And not only their parents were slaves, their grandparents were slaves, and probably their great-grandparents were slaves. They don't know what life is to be free. You don't, we get up in the morning and say, what do I want to have for breakfast? I can have oatmeal, I can have this, I can have a cream of wheat, I can have a bagel, right? When you're a slave, you have what your master gives you. When your parents were slaves, they got, and their grandparents and great-grandparents, that means everybody you knew, for going way back, you're a slave. You don't think about what you're going to eat. It's not part of it. You eat whatever they give you. You dress whatever clothes they give you. You marry whoever they give you. Your children belong to them. Everything is your master, right? That's what a slave is. So God tells the Jewish people, you're at the low of history right now. You have gone through like a Holocaust for hundreds of years, right? Over 100 years. You've gone through this. It's changed you, but you will become great. You are like the moon. Now the moon has disappeared. It's just a little sliver. Tomorrow's going to get bigger, and then bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're going to become great. And in history, you're going to have low times where you're going to go down, and you're not going to live the life you're supposed to live. And then you're going to come back up again. You have to realize human beings can change. Human beings can adapt. They can learn. They can grow. They can be different people. You say, people use an expression, once a thief, always a thief. A leopard doesn't change his spots. Well, this is not true. In Judaism, we say that you can change. It's not easy to change. The hardest thing to change is a character trait. Right? If you get angry easy, it's hard to not get angry easy. But you can change it. And this is how we know it. Because the first mitzvah God gave the Jewish people was the mitzvah of renewal. To renew, to change, to grow, to improve. That's what he was saying. You have to know this as human beings. Your goal is to become the best person you can and to do the most you can for the world. That's your goal. And you say, I'm a slave, for God's sake. What am I supposed to do for the world? I don't even have my own clothes. I don't have my own place to live. I don't even pick what I eat for breakfast. And I'm supposed to change the world? Your God says, yes. Your calendar is the lunar calendar. As the moon grows and changes, so do you. You can go and do it. It'll take effort, it'll take work, but you'll do it. And from that point, 49 days later, the Jewish nation becomes the most powerful nation in the world at that time. They receive the Torah. They're on a spiritual high. They're holding hands with God. Right? It happens once in the history of the world. And they went from being slaves who were barely human to becoming spiritual supermen, right? Every one of them. That happens because of this mitzvah, and therefore this mitzvah sounds like it's like it's sort of anticlimactic. Tell me, be holy because I am holy. Right? Keep the seventh day because I keep the seventh day. Right? No, keep a calendar. The idea is that that's what the calendar is telling you. It's telling you every day you can be a different person. You can improve. Right? The world says you can't. The world has a solar calendar. Everything's the same. Lepers don't change their spots, and thieves will be thieves. But we know that you can change. And that you can be a criminal in your 20s, and you can be righteous in your 30s. For real, not faking it. You really can. You can do it. Any one of us can do it. And many of us have experienced it ourselves, have seen the changes in our own lives, and what we've been able to accomplish. And we still have a lot of ways to go. But that's why this is so important. And then we get into the next mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of the Paschal offering, called the Korban Pesach. This is an extraordinary one, which we won't even be able to go into all at length. But this mitzvah is, of course, the offering that God tells them. First thing, you take a lamb, right? And I want you to tie it, put a rope on it and tie it and put it in your front yard. Now, you're going to in 3 days, you're going to kill this lamb, and you're going to make a sacrifice with it. And the sacrifice is that you're going to cook it in a certain way, and then your family, as a family, eats it together. And you take the blood and put it on your door, and therefore nobody in this house will die when I come over and kill the firstborn. So what is it telling us? First thing is, The sheep, or lamb, was the god of the Egyptians. You even see it today in archaeology. They prayed to sheep. So you imagine here are the slaves, right? The slaves. They take the god of the Egyptians, they attach it to a rope, attach it to their house in their front yard. And all of their pals, the Egyptians, come walking by and saying, hey, what are you guys doing? This is our god. What are you doing with our sheep? Oh, we're going to take it and slaughter it and we're going to eat it. Right? And they're their slaves. Right? It's like, you imagine if you're like this low, person, you come to India and you decide you're going to open a McDonald's. Right? You're going to sell cow. They're not going to be so happy with you. So here the Egyptians, right, are not going to be very happy with the Jews. So God says, number one, I put you through this experience so you should be tough. Right? The first thing you're going to do is stand up. So you're going to stand up to the people who made you into slaves. And you're going to show them who's who. And you're going to show them you don't believe in their animal gods. And that's what they did. And then after you do that, you take the animal, you slaughter it, and you eat it. So that next thing teaches us what a sacrifice is in Judaism. Right? In our mind, we think of a sacrifice. You take an animal, you kill it, you throw it on a fire, you burn it up. I'm sacrificing it. I paid for this animal, and I'm just turning it into ashes. That's not what it is. This is an example, but they're very similar. All our sacrifices are similar. That you take this animal, you slaughter it, you put it on a rotisserie, and you cook it. And then your family gets together and eats it. And that's a sacrifice. The idea being is that you've taken the meat, you've made it holy. You've done something special to it, then made a special mitzvah with it, and then everybody eats it. That's what a sacrifice for us, though it doesn't come from the word sacrifice. Sacrifice is like you waste something for a bigger cause. Right? I'll sacrifice this for that. For us, the word is not sacrifice. The Hebrew word is karban. Karban comes from the word karev, to make close. And that is that this animal will assist us in becoming close to God. So we'll kill the animal, and we'll eat the animal, and we'll share the animal. We won't waste it. And by doing it in a special way, with special thoughts, and eating it in a special manner, we'll become closer to God. And that's what happens. So here, we're given that mitzvah. Now this is a mitzvah that's, one of the interesting things about it is that you're supposed to eat it with a group, and it's supposed to be your family. Should be the group. If you don't have a family, you eat it with friends. If you have a stranger, right, who's there, a Jewish guy who has no family, you bring him into your family. You know what that sounds like? Passover Seder, right? Doesn't we have that feeling at a Passover Seder? How many people you know have a Passover Seder with 2 people? Not too many people do that. You make this Passover Seders of 20 people. I hear from the women, I made a Seder for 30 people. I made a Seder for 25 people. I made a Seder for 40 people. Right? We all do it. They all do it. Right? Why? Why don't you tell me you make a Hanukkah dinner for 40 people, or you make Rosh Hashanah lunch for 40 people? Right? We don't do that. Right? You might have it, but we all do it for Passover. It comes from this idea that you have your Passover sacrifice, right, with your family. That's the unit. You get together as a family unit, and it bonds you together as we're about to leave Egypt. So too on Passover night, we get together with our family and with the people we care for and people who don't have anyone else, and we bring them together and we celebrate the going out of Egypt the exact same way. That's what we do. When the time comes and the temple is rebuilt, we'll get together and do it like this. Instead of the Seder as we do it, we'll do it in this way. Because here they eat matzah, they have lamb, they have a lot of the things that we have. Much of the stuff that we have in our Seder is to remember this. So we won't have to do that because we're going to be doing it. But you'll see similarities. So that's the Passover offering. So then in the end, they take the blood from this animal and they put it on the doorpost of their home. That is the frame around the door. They put this blood on there, and they will go to sleep. And of course, it says the angel of death would see the blood on their doorpost, and nobody would die in that house. Now, of course, we know God doesn't. You don't need to put blood on your door for God to know not to kill anyone in this house. God knows. God knows who's in the house. What are you putting blood on your door for? And here, the fact is that we're putting them together. That you put blood on your door, and then the angel will look and not kill anybody in your house. But the fact is that by putting the blood on our door, what we're making a statement is that we are totally ridding ourselves from any feeling of being second class to the Egyptians. We're taking their God and killing it, and we're eating it, and we're taking the blood and painting our house with it. And we're showing them, you think you guys are so powerful? You think you're in charge of us? Well, this is what we're doing. And it was a statement that we have one master, and it's not an Egyptian, it's God. That's our master. And he told us to do this, we're doing it. And if you didn't do that, that meant that you couldn't get past the idea of having a human master. Right? And therefore all of the people, all of the Jews were told you have to do this in order to be saved, so that nobody dies in your house. And that's exactly how they did. Right, so after, of course, we have this thing with the firstborn. So the Egyptians tell Pharaoh that everybody's dying. Pharaoh comes out, tells him, and he says, get out of here. And we see this starting on 358, 359. He says, get out of here. All right, that's it. You win. Get out of here. And Moshe says, we're not going. That's what he says it. We're not going. Like, you're telling us to go? We're not going. Because you did not send us out of Egypt. God took us out of Egypt. We'll go tomorrow morning. Right? That's what he says. We're not going to go now. We're going to go tomorrow. Right? Pharaoh wants to get rid of them because everybody, all these dead people. Right? And they said, no, we're not going to go, because Moshe understood we're not going to have in history that Pharaoh freed the Jews. He's not the Abraham Lincoln of the Jews. Right? God is the Abraham Lincoln of the Jews. God freed the Jews, not Pharaoh. So when Pharaoh says, you can go now, get out of here, they didn't go. They waited until the next day. But then, funny enough, it says, why do we have matzahs? Because they didn't have time to bake bread. Well, I just told you they had time to bake bread, right? He tells them to go at night. They leave in the morning. You can bake bread. So it wasn't literally that they didn't have time to bake bread. They took the matzahs and that was left over from this offering that they just did, like we have at our Seder, and they took that with them. Because it wasn't that they didn't have time to do it, literally. They literally did. But they're showing that they went quickly. They went, as soon as the sun rose, they were gone. And they went quickly out from Egypt. And that's because that's when God wanted them to go. God wanted it had to be at this moment, not a moment before, a moment after. And therefore they went. Right? And it goes through this, the description of this. When we get to the end of the PARSHA, right, it has, it suddenly changes. Yeah.
Could you just go over what you said there was time to bake bread, right? But I didn't understand why.
So
they didn't, just because they had to hurry?
Well, the idea was that they were told to go quickly, right? So it wasn't that they theoretically they could have used their some time to bake bread, but they used it in other ways.
Okay.
And it was the idea of showing that they went quickly was they purposely didn't bake the bread. They took it with them in an unbaked form, and then it was made into matzah.
Okay.
Right? So at the end, we end up with a total change from these have this long story, and then God gives us the mitzvah of tefillin. It's just like on 362 and 363, and then it goes on after that, and it gives us the mitzvah of the of what we have here is this firstborn donkey, right? And it's sort of odd. You say, yeah, right. If you look at this thing on the donkey on 363, it shall come to pass when Hashem will bring you to the land of the Canaanites, as He swore. All right. You shall set apart every first issue of the womb to Hashem, and every first issue that's dropped by livestock that belong to you. The males are Hashem's. Every first issue donkey you shall redeem with a lamb or kid. If you do not redeem it, you shall axe the back of its neck, and you shall redeem every human firstborn among your sons. So this is the idea of, right, you have pidyon ben. You redeem your son. Really, our firstborn sons are supposed to be dedicated to the temple. That's originally God wanted that one member of every family would work in the temple, work in wherever it was that would be the sacrifices, and God would and they would represent the family. As time went on, it became apparent that couldn't be. They had Kohanim. The Kohanim did it. But at this point, this was the plan. They were going to have it. Every family had such a person, and every animal, the firstborn, was also holy. Now, holy doesn't mean that it was a god or that it had something about it. It's just you weren't supposed to use it if you didn't redeem it. You redeemed it by giving money to the temple or something else to the temple, and that way you could redeem it. But if you didn't do it, then you had this animal you couldn't use. Right? So in the case of this one that it describes here, this donkey, you would take it and kill it by putting an axe to the back of its head. So it's back of its neck. So why? What's the idea here? Why such a funny description? So it's basically, I don't have time to go through all the details, but I'll just tell you in general, the idea is that this animal is dedicated to holiness. If you're not going to use it for holiness, it has no purpose to live. And this is an important point. We realize ourselves that a part of who we are is holy. We also have mundane lives. We have to work for a living. We have to take showers and be clean and fix up our homes, and we have to do all this mundane stuff. But why do we do it? Everything that we do, we are ultimately doing for a holy reason, right? We have, God gives us money so we can buy things. Also so that we can share, that we can invite people over, we can have meals, we can do things, we can give charity, right? So why does He do it? God gives us these things so that we can do good with it. If we choose not to do good with it, right, and God gave it to us, so we have wasted it. Not that we didn't buy something, buy a suit with the money, and I bought a suit and I didn't give charity. If you don't give the charity, then you wasted the money no matter what you used it for. If you don't redeem this animal, then you've wasted the animal and it gets killed. In other words, the purpose of it is holy. If you're not going to use it for holiness, it has no purpose anymore. So we too have to understand that a part of us is also holy. If we ignore the holiness in our lives, then it's like we have no purpose in the world. Not that we are only holy, but if we ignore that part, if we ignore the spiritual part, all we have left is the animal part of who we are, because we're both animal and spiritual, right? We have physical bodies like an animal. We have a soul that's spiritual, right? If we ignore the spirit and all we are is physical, then we've wasted the purpose of our life, right? You can't ignore the physical because then you'll die, but you can't ignore the spiritual either. And that's a message that is telling us here, that this animal, it's better to kill it than it should not be used for its right purpose. A human, of course, is not better to kill, but we need to know the idea that our right purpose is to have spirituality in our life, so that everything we do for the right reason, right? If I want to eat steak, so you say, well, that's pretty physical. Yeah, but if I want to eat steak, I'm going to say a blessing on the steak. I'm going to eat only kosher steak. I'm going to say a blessing afterwards. The energy I got from the steak, I'm going to use, and I'm going to do acts of kindness for people. So is it a spiritual or a physical act? Well, it is physical, but its purpose was spiritual. Did I enjoy the steak anyways? Yeah, I did. Will I enjoy it the same if I just eat it and just go to sleep? Yeah, I'll enjoy it just the same. But the purpose is better. Is now holy, right? Everything I do is an act of giving, is an act of holiness, even though I'm doing the same thing. Two people can have the same meal, and one of them is doing a holy thing and one is not. It's in your intention, and that's what that tells us. So now that the Jewish people are going out, you have to be stubborn in order to get through history. We know that we have to have spirituality in our lives, and we know that no matter how low we fall and how many mistakes we make, we can always become better. That's what the three mitzvahs tell us at the end, right? That now that the Jewish people are a people, and from this point on, we are no longer a bunch of Hebrew slaves. We are a Jewish nation. That was, at this point, it becomes created. And from this point on, we're referred to as the Jewish nation. And it totally changes everything. Up until now, it's just children of Abraham. Right? That's the change. All right? So we're going to keep on the progression and see what happens next when we meet next week. Okay?
One question.
Yes. Thank you all.